Thank you. Buongiorno. Faleminderit. Thank you, Professor, Mr. Vice Rector, Madam Ambassador, professors, dear students. I'm sorry I can't speak to you in Italian, at least not yet, but I'll do my best for next time. I'm going to visit the university that my Italian is going to be so much better than at this point in time. I want to thank you for your presence. And as I told the Vice Rector when we met this morning, one of my favorite parts of every visit that I make around the world is particularly speaking to academics and students. Coming from an academic background myself, I know how important it is that the leaders of tomorrow have all the proper information about what's going on beyond their borders so that they can contribute to peace and democracy beyond their borders once they get to lead their countries, as well as have important roles in decision making in the future. I want to talk to you today about the example of Kosovo. And although Kosovo might be a small country in terms of its sheer geography, I believe that we have an impact because we have an important story to tell and quite an important voice in that sense. So the very first thing that I want to encourage you is to make sure that you understand the importance of your voice, not just locally, but internationally. Because as we can see in the case of Kosovo, the very long struggle for peace, for freedom, for democracy, for state building, for independence has set quite a shining example in the world. Kosovo is a very young republic because it just turned 15 years old, but it's a true beacon of democracy and a shining example of democracy building as well as state building. When I say democracy, I speak with conviction because it's not just a political statement. It is never rhetoric. In fact, it is a reality that has been confirmed through international reports. Kosovo nowadays is an excellent example of contributing to the Summit for Democracy that has been convened by President Biden as one of the champions when it comes to delivering in its commitments. In only 2 years, we have jumped 20 places higher in the Transparency International Fighting Crime and Corruption Index. According to the World Justice Project in 2022, Kosovo ranked second in the world in terms of improvements in the rule of law. And according to Freedom House in a recent report, Kosovo ranks number 1 in the Western Balkans, number 2 in Europe, and number 3 in the world for progress made in political rights as well as civil liberties. I think these are concrete examples of what a small country can do, in fact, in giving a big example and having a bigger impact in the world. But most importantly, what Kosovo shows today, almost 25 years after its liberation and 15 years after its independence, is the greatest embodiment of what democracies can achieve when they stand together against tyrannies, against genocidal regimes, and in turn they stand for freedom, for liberties, for human rights, as well as for peace. The Constitution of the Republic of Kosovo, which is, of course, the guiding light of every single action that we take as institutions, is one of the most advanced in Europe. In fact, the chapters that deal with human rights, as well as minority community rights, are unseen in any other European state. And when I'm talking here European, I'm not only talking about the European Union, obviously much more than that, even countries outside of the EU. Kosovo is, as I said, has one of the most advanced package of rights, constitutional rights, as well as legislative rights when it comes to its minority communities. In addition to that, to make sure that we all understand that democracy is never a finished project. You always need to strive for more. You always need to do more. No matter what these international indices say about these successes that we have achieved, we need to understand that there is more that we can do for our citizens. I have established as president the Council for Democracy and Human Rights, which is an institution that is going to foresee the actions of every other institution in Kosovo at a national level or at local level when it comes to protecting civil liberties, political rights, minority community rights, but also one very important aspect, which is gender equality. Because, of course, women have advanced when it comes to their political rights and representation in Kosovo. because the people of Kosovo, through their direct vote, have made women a woman the most voted person in the history of the country, but at the same time made sure that our parliament has the highest number of women ever represented, and we have that in the government as well. But that doesn't necessarily mean that women in our society, no matter their jobs, don't face challenges. They still face a lot of challenges. So that's why the Council for Democracy and Human Rights is there to make sure that we not just give recommendations, but we build national platforms which need to be taken as a matter of urgency in dealing with issues that are the most acute problems of our citizens. We have achieved, of course, a lot of successes during the past 2 decades or so, but the country still faces a lot of challenges, not to say the least economic challenges. Of course, after the illegal Russian invasion against Ukraine, this has touched the economies of countries in Europe and beyond. So, of course, Kosovo is one of the countries that has been negatively impacted by the global economic crisis, by the energy crisis, and the rest. But there is one thing that the people of Kosovo have never allowed because of their resilience, and that is malign influences. Kosovo stands strong against any Russian or Chinese malign influence. And it is the only country in the Western Balkans, in fact, that is not part of the China Road and Belt Initiative. And at the same time, we have made sure that we use all democratic instruments possible to make sure that there is absolutely no Russian influence in the country. At this point, Kosovo is at the 100% alignment with European Union common and security foreign policy. In fact, even though we're not a candidate country yet, we have made sure that we unilaterally, because we want, of course, to become part of the EU at much earlier stages, we align every single decision of ours with those of the EU, especially in the area of foreign and security policy, including the immediate decision to impose sanctions on Russia, where Kosovo was the very first country in the Western Balkans to join the EU and the United States in this decision. And of course, we make sure that we adapt sanctions every single time that the EU and the US do so. So Kosovo has chosen its path. In fact, we have done that a long time ago. Our founding father, Dr. Ibrahim Rugova, who worked with Italy very, very strongly, made sure that long ago we had a very clear vision, and that is Euro-Atlantic integration. More than 93% of the citizens of Kosovo believe that the only path that we should walk on is the European Union path and the NATO path. We strongly believe in alliances. In fact, we believe that our power lies in our partnerships. That's the biggest leverage that a democratic country has. And as we can see today, after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, these principles are put at test today. In fact, as President Biden has recently said in Poland, it is precisely in times of great turmoil, precisely in times when we are tested as nations, as societies, that what matters most is what you stand for, to choose what you stand for. And what makes all the difference is who stands with you. These principles had been put at test in Kosovo as well. In early 90s, not too many people actually know about this because they have read about the war in 98-99. But in fact, an apartheid-like system had been established in Kosovo by the Milosevic regime in 1989. So about 10 years before the actual war started. We were all kicked out of our schools. There was legislation by the Milosevic regime that put forward discrimination against Albanians, although we were more than 90% of the population in Kosovo, in every aspect of life. No right to education, no right to political participation, no right to work. All of our parents were kicked out of their jobs for the simple fact of being Albanian. Albanians were being taken to prison without due process of law, without any trial, and hundreds of thousands of years of political prison they had to suffer because they believed in the freedom and independence of Kosovo. So practically, I'm sure that you've heard a lot about the South African apartheid. In fact, what happened in Kosovo in 1989 until the war was over was an exact model that was used by the Milosevic regime to make sure that all civil, political, economic, or cultural rights of Albanians were striped off, and he also made sure that he abolishes the rights that Kosovo had according to the 1974 constitution. Of course, all crimes in accordance with international law. And then this led, of course, after a long peaceful resistance, this also led to the armed resistance and to the war that happened in 1998 and 1999. Nowadays, practically every single day in Kosovo, we commemorate a massacre in a village, in a city, in a neighborhood, because back in 1998 and 1999, especially the months of March to June, were full of massacres committed against civilians. Entire villages wiped out of people, little children killed in their houses together with their moms and burned down to death, burned alive. A lot of places where you go to villages and practically every single kid in that village grew up without a father, because all the men in the father were killed. So now you see so many young people that even today they don't have a place where to lay a flower, because there are more than 1,600 people from the war in Kosovo that are still in massive graves in Serbia, which means that the crimes are being committed over and over again, even after the war was over 4 years ago. So the pains and the struggles and the wounds of the people of Kosovo are very deep, and the sacrifice has been very, very long, but also big. But at the same time, Kosovo is so committed to look towards the future. And at the same, as I said at the beginning, it is one of those examples that shows how important alliances are. In March 1999, the democratic world came to our rescue and made sure that it bombed all of the military capabilities of Serbia at that time, so that the war would end in June. When NATO came into Kosovo, including so many Italian soldiers, they were expected by the people of Kosovo as saviors, as liberators, because that's what they are. That's the contribution that these nations, including Italy, gave to Kosovo. And today, of course, we owe our freedom, our independence, and our democracy to our fallen heroes, to all of the martyrs, all of the people that have given their lives, to the people of Kosovo, primarily because of their resilience and their struggle, but at the same time to our allies, because if it wasn't for these countries coming to our rescue, of course Milosevic would have continued with a genocide against the people of Kosovo. And the international community did not leave us alone even after 1999. It made sure that Kosovo takes the right paths, the right steps towards state building and peace building, and it fully supported the declaration of our independence back in 2008, which is when our country was born. Of course, the very pillars of our country are very strong, because Kosovo was built on what we call the shared values that today also stand at the foundations of the European Union. Our strive for peace, our strive for freedom, our strive for democracy and human rights. And when you have such strong pillars, obviously you have a strong country, because the desire of our people is equally strong to defend these shared values. We have continued to have the support of our allies precisely because they see Kosovo as a credible partner in defending these values at home and abroad. And throughout these 15 years of independence, Kosovo has been recognized by 117 countries internationally. It's a member of a number of international organizations, including UN agencies. And right now, there is a new agreement that has been reached under the auspices of the European Union and the United States, which also obliges Serbia not to object to Kosovo's membership in any international organization. And we strongly believe that this creates a new momentum for Kosovo to gain new recognitions and at the same time to gain new memberships in international organizations. Some might ask, but why do you actually need to be in these international organizations? I know that for those of you that have had a seat there for a long time, someone might take it for granted. But for the people of Kosovo, it means a lot. It means a lot to be in the Council of Europe, for example, because that means that our citizens will have the right to initiate cases at the European Court of Human Rights, to defend their rights, to increase the level of protection of basic human rights. It means a lot for the people of Kosovo to be able for our country to have a seat at the WHO, World Health Organization, because just during the pandemic, we were not able to have access to so many services that countries that are members of the WHO have. For example, if you're in the WHO, if you want to buy, let's say, a vaccine of one sort, you can pay a much lower price compared to a country that is not a member of the WHO, and not to talk about all the level and quality of healthcare that is offered if you're a member of these international organizations. Or Interpol. Interpol will help us fight transnational organized crime. You understand very well, of course, as we do, that today fighting crimes means having information at the right time. If you don't have the information, people might just pass transit because the police officer standing at the border doesn't know that someone is a criminal or not. That's why being in Interpol matters a lot, so that we are even more effective in fighting cross-border crime. So these organizations, after all, are about the people. The ultimate beneficiaries of having a seat in any of these international organizations are our citizens, no matter their nationality, no matter their religion or other background. So I strongly believe that with the support of our partners, Kosovo will manage to make steps forward in its further international integration. Because let's not forget, Kosovo's success is internationally. It's not just the success of Kosovo. It's our joint success. Our freedom was a joint success of the people of Kosovo and yours, our partners. Our independence was a joint success of the people of Kosovo and our partners. And our further international integration until the moment where we are equal members of the international community, sitting next to Italy. Why not? Because even in alphabetical order, it turns out that we're a little closer to one another. Only then we can understand that the project of having an equal partner, the Republic of Kosovo, is a finished project. And we will, of course, in turn, give back. Today, our army is serving side by side the US Army, the UK Army in bilateral projects, in peacekeeping projects around the world. We are contributing in all international organizations where we have a say. We are contributing to peace projects, to democracy projects, to rule of law projects. I mentioned the Summit of Democracy at the very beginning, where more than 120 countries participate. But Kosovo is one of the top 10 champions, talking about successes, talking about delivering for your citizens, talking about not just representing the citizens through their active participation, but at the same time making sure that when we say democracy delivers, we actually mean it. In this sense, we want to have the chance to give back, because 25 years ago, you came to our rescue, and now we want to give that contribution. We want to serve side by side Italy and our partners around the world to make sure that Kosovo can give back for the contribution that it has received. And of course, one important element that is happening at this point is Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. Of course, when it started in 2010, the UN General Assembly was very clear on what this dialogue is about through a General Assembly resolution. It stated that this is a dialogue between two equal parties on practical matters. Because, of course, as you can see internationally, many countries have problems and they have to resolve them through dialogue as the best means to find a solution to outstanding issues. Since 2010, Kosovo and Serbia have signed a lot of bilateral agreements on many issues of practical importance. Serbia has not implemented the vast majority of these agreements, because as everyone that has had to deal with Serbia in the history of their relations, we have understood that with that country you have two sets of negotiations. One is to convince them to sign, and the other one is to convince them to implement. And the second one is oftentimes more difficult than the first. So this is what we're facing also in the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, where the vast majority of what they've signed or agreed to is not being implemented. We understand that the dialogue process is important, which is why Kosovo has extended its hand of cooperation. Although Serbia has never apologized, has never shown a little sign of repent for the crimes that it has committed. It still sleeps on massive graves of the people of Kosovo, civilians who are still missing from the war and were, of course, forcibly disappeared. Despite of all of this, Kosovo is willing, it's constructive to participate in the dialogue. Unfortunately, Serbia is using the method of obstruction through participation. Those of you that will be studying negotiations in international relations, you will notice that sometimes some parties that don't engage in good faith, they go sit at the table, but they sit at the table with the intention to delay, the intention to drag the process, the intention to create crisis after crisis, and the intention to obstruct. So this is exactly what is being used right now. Our appeal to the international community is this: stop the active appeasement policy. We should learn from history. And history has a very clear lesson, many clear lessons in fact, but there's one that is very clear, including with what is going on in Ukraine right now, and that is appeasement of autocrats never works. It only emboldens them. It encourages them. It encourages them to attack more, to not respect their neighbors, to try more hegemonic methods instead of working for peace. And we are very concerned that if Serbia continues to be appeased in the way that it is so far, that it will only encourage them to continue with their destabilizing methods that are serving Putin in order to destabilize the Western Balkans. And as we all know, there can be no Europe whole, free, and at peace if the Western Balkans doesn't join the European Union. But the Western Balkans cannot join the EU if it continues to be destabilized by a Russian proxy in our part of the world, which is very, very important that clear messages and clear action is taken towards Serbia if they continue to try to walk in two paths at once, the Moscow path and the European Union path, because it's just impossible to walk on both paths at the same time. They have to choose the European Union for their sake, but also for the sake of peace and stability in the entire Western Balkans. But at the same time, no matter what they do, there is one thing that is for sure going to continue to happen, and that is Kosovo's continuous and full commitment towards the Euro-Atlantic path. We have never looked elsewhere. We never flirt with other malign influences. There's only one path that we look at. We walk in, but we also walk the talk. We don't just talk, we walk the talk. We make sure that our political commitments is also action undertaken on a daily basis. Because this is not just a political vision. It's the vision of our people, chosen a long time ago. A vision for which 13,000 civilians gave their lives. And a lot of others have suffered and continue to suffer to this date. It is the very embodiment of what our society, our country, and our nation stand for, which is why we will never, ever give up on these values, and we will never, ever give up on this path. And of course, in this path, there are a lot of challenges, which is why we continue to ask for the support of Italy, of that of the Italian institutions, but also academics. We have seen firsthand that when the Kosovo people started their struggle for independence and freedom, very little people around the world knew that we even existed. But there were some professors around the world, one perhaps here in Calabria, one somewhere in New York, one somewhere in Rome, one perhaps all the way to Australia, one in Germany, and one somewhere else, who were talking to their students, who were knocking on the political doors so that they can speak for us, so that they can be the voice of the voiceless. In this sense, I want to ask for your support. Speak up, because your voice matters more than you think. Even if you're a student, speak up. If you're a professor, speak up even more. Speak up for a people that have sacrificed so much so that one day we can manage to sit alongside you in the Euro-Atlantic integration institutions, and at the same time, so that we can give a contribution to peace, security, and stability in the world alongside you. Thank you very much.